Welcome to another episode here at Lightingbot. Today we have a different topic about a little bit about teamwork, a little bit about leadership, and probably we're gonna touch upon things like imposter syndrome and personal development and so on and so forth. But luckily, I don't have to do these things alone. So we have someone here today named Kevin. I'll let him introduce himself. Also, a heads up, because we changed the schedule a little bit because of me. So that means the LinkedIn might not work or might work the stream, but I'll work on it in the background and check it. As usual, leave your comments and questions, and hopefully we can answer them all. So let's welcome Kevin to the stream. Hey, man.
Hello. How's it going?
Oh, good. Man, I like your lighting as well. It's pretty really really popping now.
Yeah, I got to do it, right?
It's really cool. So, so who are you, Kevin, and what have you been up to this, couple of years? So, let's introduce you a bit, because not everyone knows you, right?
Okay. My name is Kevin Dalziel. I'm currently a principal lighting artist at Team Kaiju, which is a in-house studio for Tencent. Previously, I spent a career kind of moving along the path of doing characters and animation and up to environment art, and then moving into lighting eventually, and doing a lot of that on pretty much all the Halo games made in the last decade plus. And then I had a stint as a lighting lead over at Hidden Path Entertainment for a while, and that was awesome. It was a lovely team full of great people, and but I ended up getting a really good opportunity to go work on this Kaiju project where we're doing something more kind of stylized, and that was really hard to resist because something I've always really wanted to do. You spend most of your career kind of trying to recreate reality in a lot of ways. All the PBR stuff, mega scans, look at the peach fuzz on people's faces, and all these different things that really are just kind of getting closer and closer to that, and to kind of switch gears and focus on just making things, just focus. The focus isn't on like how realistic does it look. It's really like how cool does it look? How much like impact does that have? So it's been a really nice transition for me in that sense. But during my time towards the tail end of working on Halo, and then over at Hidden Path, and even now at the team I'm at right now, I find myself in some of these positions where I'm kind of doing some mentorship and helping other people learn and grow, and kind of managing parts of a project from the lighting side. So that's given me a lot of really good insight as to the best ways to make those things work, and how to help people get the job done, and how to help them grow along the way, and kind of try and get it done in the healthiest way possible. As we've all kind of seen in this industry, sometimes things can operate in very kind of unhealthy ways. There's plenty of that in the news, and so I've kind of spent a lot of my time, going through these different trials and tribulations, sort of just watching and learning and seeing the different ways that you can kind of manage things, and learning from people who I've really looked up to, and really admired the way that they've handled themselves, and how they've help people grow, and seeing other people go down different paths where I've, kind of consciously thought to myself, okay, that's something I definitely don't want to repeat myself. So.
Cool. So, we'll try and do our best to organize the conversation, but we never really do. We just go with the flow, to be honest. So since we just go with the flow, but we stick to the main topic. So the first thing that strikes my mind is, I'm like a senior lighting artist at the moment, and I obviously have a high imposter syndrome. And a lot of people do ask me, and I have been in the process of being asked, should I be a lead lighting artist? Should I enter that leadership role or not? And you having been a lead lighting artist and a principal lighting artist, these are two different type of higher ranked responsibilities for lighting artists. So let's start with making sure people understand the difference between the principal lighting artist and a lead lighting artist. What would that be in your experience so far?
I mean, honestly, in a lot of cases, titles can be somewhat interchangeable when you kind of get to that level, because a lot of studios kind of have their own like nomenclature for how they want to operate on those things. But kind of truly where you're doing that leadership role is when you're helping kind of define things and set out, anything from style guides to, helping onboard people, helping them learn tools, and, guiding them from, like kind of doing the like craft leadership, I guess is a term for it, where you are, you have some people who are working, like, so for instance, on Halo Infinite, I was kind of looking after the multiplayer side of the lighting team, and we had a couple other people, one of which, Gregory Shevtsov, I think you spoke to another time, great guy. And so I ended up working with them a lot to, sorry, my something. Anyways, yeah, so I ended up working with him a lot, and some other folks, and we go through our map reviews and things like that, and we spend time together looking at things and kind of puzzling out like if there's an area where things aren't quite looking right, or there's been some feedback, or we're just trying to we're looking at it and thinking together like, okay, this doesn't look quite as good. And sometimes it comes down to like, oh well, like let's take a look at some of the buffer views and things like that. Let's take a look at albedos and roughness. And sometimes we can identify other things where we might, as a team be like, hey, can you guys on the material side, can we get some more wet floor right here so we can get some cool reflections? And, maybe here's some opportunities where we can use a gobo or gel, those sorts of things. And so that was kind of my experience there. And then also I was kind of looking after some of the cinematic lighting for a while. So we'd be looking through shots as things are coming in, and we would be, finding certain aspects that could be tweaked or improved, and, getting feedback from the narrative director. So a lot of times you kind of get these kind of like higher level notes, but sometimes that the road to get to where that feedback wants you to go isn't always clear, or there's not a really immediate solution that shows itself. So sometimes your experience working with the engine and kind of like understanding some of the people who are doing this directing kind of allows you to say, I think what they really want is, something like this, and we can accomplish it by doing this. And so, yeah, that's where a lot of my experience comes from, as far as like working with people in that regard.
Cool. So if someone were to choose to be a lead lighting artist, what would you say is some of the key skills required compared to just being a senior lighting artist or a lighting artist? What would you say you need if you were to choose to be a lead lighting artist, or not? Because maybe you don't want to do all the responsibilities that come with being a lead lighting artist. That's obviously a potential situation too, which I've heard about.
It's not for everybody. Honestly, it's if you find yourself like one thing I found as I was, kind of the stuff we were just talking about, where I was helping kind of do some mentoring and helping kind of guide people to, kind of improve their work throughout these two different teams. One thing that, you stop having as much time to do your own personal, like, IC work, as they call it, individual contributor work. So you end up, spending more of your time kind of helping other people make their stuff look cooler. So it's kind of this gear switch from, a lot of your career, you're kind of just trying, like, you have this sort of personal creative drive, and you get that satisfaction from doing something yourself and seeing it look good, and kind of coming back with that, all right, cool, I did it. I feel happy about it. And so you kind of start realizing that you can get there's a lot of that personal satisfaction from hearing somebody like something click in their head, and watching them kind of do some work. And like, I remember a few times with Gregory, for instance, where we'd be talking about something, and, we'd be chatting about, like, why don't you try just putting something over there and having it, kind of backlight that pillar, and, kind of rim light that out, so you can kind of see where this is coming from. And, he'd start noodling around with it, and we'd just be hanging out. And then he'd be like, he put it there, and all of a sudden, boom. And we're like, all right, man, that looks good. And he'd be like, oh, hell yeah. And so hearing that kind of like satisfaction and positivity, and kind of hearing people like finding these things click, it's you start looking at that as like, this is now the thing that is my own like kind of creative personal satisfaction instead of just doing the work. So if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like that is something that you could find gratifying, if you are able to kind of let go of having like the personal stake in things, then it would definitely be a good avenue to go in. It's a nice way to grow. It's a whole other skill. It's a whole other way of looking at things. And you can still do as much personal work as you like and all of that. So it doesn't mean you don't get to do anything anymore. But it is a change. So you kind of have to understand that. And if it's something that sounds good to you, then I highly recommend it. But if not, then if you are just like, I don't really like want to help people or not that you don't want to help people, but I don't really want to spend my time doing that, and I really just like kind of diving in, putting on some good music or whatever and just cranking away and making cool stuff, then a senior role where you're kind of just kicking ass and doing the work, that's a perfectly fine thing to do. I know several people that have had those opportunities come up and they've just been like, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to make me happy. And that's good. It's good to be honest that way, honestly.
So would you say that if you were to choose to be in a lead position as a lighting artist in this particular context, would you say you would need to have a better developed eye to help the other lighting artists more than the technical skills? Or would you say both are equally important, or one is more important when you're in the position of being a lead?
I would say it's kind of a 30-70 split. The technical skills are kind of the 30%. It's good to have those, and it can be really, really helpful for you to be able to kind of have a quick screen share, chat with somebody, and kind of help them understand the engine better and achieve some things, especially with like things like proprietary engines. With Unreal, it's a little bit less of an issue because there's just such a wealth of information out there, and there's so many, like, you just throw a dart and you'll hit a tutorial on YouTube that will really help you kind of up your game, like on that kind of visual sense, or help you learn some of like the lighting tools and other things like that. There's tons of great resources there. But the well-developed eye, and that's kind of another thing where you can sort of help people who are kind of just coming in. A lot of times, you've been really, really hyper focused on your own things or your own kind of areas, and having that's also another thing that's nice about not being like super close to it and having all of your own work kind of stuck around it, is you have that a little bit more of a bird's eye view, and you can kind of see the trajectory, see where it's going, and you can kind of help guide that in the sense of what's going to help the big picture side of it. And potentially, like, a lot of the experience you've already had, maybe shipping some other games, you can kind of see where things are going to go. People might be like, I don't like the way this is looking, and just, hey man, like, guess what? We're only in blockout right now. This is all going to change. We're going to get new materials, things like that. It's not worth freaking out about or anything like that at this point. Just let's like work on the blocking and move on, and then we'll come back to this and things like that. So that can kind of help. That sort of attitude is really helpful, and can kind of help when people are sort of really like staring super microscopically at everything, I guess.
Cool. So let's talk a little bit more about working in team then, in this particular case. So what would you say when you are in a larger team? Because obviously, like, for example, me, I don't normally work in large teams. It's normally me or maybe one or two other person, or they are an extended team. Mm-hmm. So what do you know, larger team, either with obviously, when you're the only lighting artist, at least in my experience, you also indirectly become the lead lighting artist, even if it's not officially your position. You have to be able to lead yourself. You have to be able to talk to the other team members a lot more, because you don't have anyone else doing it for you. So you have to be the one talking to the cinematic team. You have to be the one who talks to the other leads, and so on and so forth. But when you have an established team and an established company, for example, such a game like Halo and so on, which normally has more than one lighting artist, obviously, what are the challenges of coordinating and managing team and working together in a team, and how do you delegate the task, and yeah, what are the pros and cons, I guess, as well, when you have multiple lighting artists, because I'm sure there are some new challenges that comes when you have other people that have some influence over the work maybe as well.
It's so yeah. As things get bigger, things can definitely get kind of more chaotic. That is that's one of the really nice things about being when it's a small team and it's this kind of view. There's a very small field of view that you need to really kind of have encompassed. Whereas as things get bigger, like you're saying, they get more complicated. There's a lot more different ways that kind of things can sort of happen, and to a certain extent, one thing that can kind of help is really just focusing in on what's like kind of like big picture items that are really important versus because there's always going to be some feedback from environment, from design, and then art direction is going to come in, and so there's always a lot of there's a lot of different stakeholders, there's a lot of different people that are giving kind of opinions and feedback and things like that. So half the time it's really just sort of helping people. You'll like in my case, a lot of times it was like I was in a lot of different kind of review meetings and things like that. And sometimes, I'd be there and then I'd be able to kind of give some feedback like, hey, we heard a bit about, this X, Y, or Z. Could you maybe just tweak this or that? So kind of like helping take a lot of this information and funnel it down to where, people are just able to kind of keep doing their thing and not be distracted by a lot of like different like feedback and just the kind of churn that things kind of go through, I guess. So that's, it's, and then, on top of that, big teams, especially on something like Halo, where you have a lot of, it's a big property. A lot of people are really passionate about it, as you can expect, right? So there's a lot of people who are just, everything is very important, right? Everything's very important. So kind of just trying to really, I guess, find the things that are important to what you need to accomplish as the lighting team, and trying to kind of to sieve those nuggets out and get those to the right people, and keep the churn from kind of affecting everyone, I guess, in a certain way, because it's a big thing with lots of opinions and lots of different kind of direction and things like that. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of one thing that you can do, as well as also just sort of keeping an eye on a lot of different things. And when you hear, people say like, well, why don't you do this? If you're in an environment review, you already heard, what the directors have to say about it. And some environment people are like, well, why don't you just do this or that? And people are like, yeah. But that kind of goes counter to exactly what, direction wants for like an entirely different reason. Then you're there to kind of jump in and sort of add context and say, I think we want it to be this way because X, Y, and Z. And then that sort of allows people, oh, okay, all right, well, I'm not super happy about that, but I'll do it for this reason, because there usually is a good reason,
So okay, so let's say you have a situation, there's one or more other lighting artists working on something. So how would you start planning for a level? Would you do some of the design or mock-up with the art director yourself, or would you do it on your own, or is there a reference board you arrange, or do you just tell someone else of the lighting artist that, hey, this is your level, it's your responsibility, and you stay out of it? How's the collaboration and the work process in these scenarios in your experience?
So a lot of times you'll kind of be working between, a lot of times, like there's the environment map lead who definitely has kind of a lot of stake on kind of like what they want it to look like. And there'll be art direction. So you kind of have like art direction, environment lead, lighting person, and potentially, if somebody else is going to hop in and assist with lighting at some point. Like we had some things like that where maps were begun with one person lighting them, and then that person got pulled off to go do something else, and then somebody else kind of backfilled that position. So sometimes you would have these situations where people inherited things, but in a perfect world, right? So let's say like you're starting a map. Generally, I think the best way to do it is you have the art direction. Like, so we had our own like kind of multiplayer art director, but if you have first, I would almost say just have the environment lead and the lighting artist kind of discuss like, hey, what's this going to be? what kind of palette is it going to be? Is this going to be up in these rocks with,
So how early does this process start then in your experience? Is it before the level design has been started, or is it already in the environment stage? When you say environment stage, does that mean we haven't even thought about the level design, but we're already thinking about the look and the feel before the level design have gotten started, or is it like the same time, or is it afterwards?
Those are all good questions, and honestly, they've kind of happened in different ways as things happen. Sometimes they'll generally start where there is a designed map, or at least a map that's in design and being like play tested and things like that. And again, this is all kind of going to, like, we're just kind of talking about sort of some of the Halo experience here. But you'll have, you know, some design maps in progress, and then the environment team will be kind of discussing, you know, how are we going to tackle this, and like what's the shape of the map. And then there might already be, in that case, there might already be like a concept that starts coming up, like we want to do this with, you know, our direction says, all right, we want to have, you know, a map that's, you know, up in these mountains with, you know, some banished stuff right there, and we want it to be accessible with vehicles, you know. And so, you know, designers have a map they've been working on that's, you know, has like a nice amount of like vehicle space and everything like that. So it's a vehicle map, and like, okay, can we start kind of combining those things together? And then, you know, the environment team will start kind of brainstorming how they're going to be putting that together. And, you know, as soon as there's anything, even when it's just in the design block out, like lighting likes to get involved and at least kind of figure out what are we going to do. So in this case, this is one map I'm kind of thinking of, was where I was, you know, talking with the environment team, and we were planning this, and, you know, it's like, let's try doing something at night. We've always kind of avoided that, but now we have some better target acquisition, things like outlines and whatnot. So like, let's try doing something at night again. It's always the I don't know why, it's like the moth to a flame, like us lighting artists are like, let's do the hard one, which is like a multiplayer map at night. It's gonna be great. So
it's gonna be great. It's gonna be look great in my portfolio as well. Let's do it.
Yeah. So yeah, and at that point, then you know, the lighting artist, I would say, should start kind of pulling together some reference for either from other games, some, you know, photos, you know, kind of anything that they can get to sort of start really getting the vibe of it. There was another map that shipped where there was like literally just this one, you know, Google image search image of, you know, we were just kind of trying, it was myself and the environment lead working on that, and we were just trying to find like the right kind of vibe, because we wanted to sort of like calm before a storm, you know, mostly cloudy with like patches of sunlight coming through, and like, let's get that feel, you know. And so, you know, if you can find one image that really captures it, then that's kind of the hinge of the lighting direction for it. It can be really helpful to sort of get, you know, if the environment lead is like, heck yeah, let's do that, and our direction is cool, then you kind of have sort of that road is kind of paved for you, and the expectations are set. So that's, you know, is the earliest you can do that and start getting that ball rolling, the better. And, you know, like I said, that kind of sets these expectations, so people kind of know what you're going to be doing, and there's not really any surprises. In a little bit, I'll talk a little bit more about like how I feel about communication, but I feel like it's very, very important, and you should do it as much as possible, to the point of being annoying, because miscommunication is one of the worst things that you can have, I guess.
Yeah, so okay, so you're the lead lighting artist in this imaginary example now, and I am the lighting artist. You have the map maker, and you have the art director, and probably maybe even a lead in a different position, and they all want to have a say on this imaginary level we're making, and you just spent a few hours. You have one reference image, and you say, okay, Amit, this is your reference image, and then basically I go and figure out, okay, this is the reference image, this is the mood, and then I figure out how to do the lighting for it. So what's the overall challenges for a lighting artist when this happens? Do they have to communicate then with the map maker on a regular basis to keep track of, okay, the line of sight, the gameplay elements, if it's changing at all, and these things? Let's talk about that communication element as well, that happens when you have this kind of a collaborative and delegation that you also have to do in a game like Halo in this case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a great question because so that it's saying, okay, Amit, let's do this. Here's your image, and like let's go for it. So first thing would be like let's I assume you already are up to speed with all the tools and everything like that, and you know where the map is, and you've already kind of talked to some of the people. If you haven't, I would say, all right, here's the person who's the map lead. Please just and I might even just start a 3-person text thread on we use Teams at Microsoft or like Slack or whatever, and just be like, hey, environment lead, this is Amit. He's going to be working on this map. And we are in like post a picture of like the reference image or anything that we have right there, and just be like, we've already kind of talked a little bit about this. And to you, I would say, all right, so first thing, let's get the fundamentals. Let's get a sun and sky kind of, at least the broad strokes kind of in there, and just kind of see how it feels, and start looking at how some of the geometry is placed, and how we start getting the sun into the space, and how we can kind of maximize the look of the kind of gameplay space, and kind of tune the lighting around it, and so off you go to do that, and just say, hey, let me know how it goes, and you're like, cool, I'll get this in like a day or two. Great, sounds good. And then when you're able to kind of submit that, or maybe like I would generally say like, when you have something cool, like let's just take a look at it and talk about it. And take a look and talk about it. I'd like to get your thoughts on how you feel about it, because actually being in the level and doing some of these things, you might have some really good feedback for how you think it's going to light, stuff that I might not be seeing. So I think it's really important that you have that kind of agency as a lighter to kind of put forth some opinions, and have your own critical thoughts about things, because
so when you say critical thought and your own opinions, taking ownership, so in that regards, I am guessing the person should be able to communicate in a constructive way why their ideas would work. So I'm guessing I couldn't come to you and say, okay, I think this color works and this range works, and I think this is awesome. I don't think that would be enough, right? Especially if you already have a clear idea, or someone else has a clear idea of how it should have been lit. So I'm guessing as a lighting artist, generally speaking, we should be, especially in a team where you have a lead and there's a lot of back and forth, and it's a multiplayer game even in some cases, you should be able to constructively argue, have an argument over like why this is a good lighting scenario or a good lighting idea, because I would imagine it's not always yes, this is cool, because everyone has their subjective idea normally. In my experience, anyways, it's rarely just a yes. It's it's a small boxing match. So
yeah, no, you're right, and like that's a really good point, because sometimes you might be. I've had plenty of times where like we have and a lot of times like the environment team and the art direction, like there's already so many kind of opinions that are trying to kind of pull together what it is. We can try and define like our time of day that we want and the weather and everything, but there's already some sort of people that have grabbed onto some of that stuff. But yeah, I think between like myself and you like, let's talk about this. And if you have like, I actually have a wild idea, and I think this is actually a better kind of reference for what might work better on this map, and I can explain it in just different ways. I would encourage you to like, it's really easy to kind of just move sun and sky around. Like why don't you like get a couple different camera angles, and like let's try and kind of do what the reference image is asking for, and then your idea, and like let's take a look, and try and be an objective, and not have your personality wrapped into it as much as possible, and just kind of take a look at how it actually ends up looking in the big picture. And in certain cases, if it's compelling enough, I would go to bat for you, honestly. If you're like, hey, I really think this would look better, and I'm like, I think you're right. I think that fits the map better. It gets into the play space better, because there's a lot of tall things around the outside, so the steeper angle looks better, things like that, right? And so I can kind of help be that support to help like communicate these things and maybe have some changes happen.
Right. Because
Or likewise, there's been other times where sometimes you see, like I myself would see things and kind of play around with a couple of things and like just send a screenshot and say like I think it might look better if we do this. Like, what do you think? And it's it's not a personal thing. It's just like let's try and get this as close as possible to as good as possible, because at the end the end result is what matters.
That's true. And I hear you saying it indirectly. Don't take it personal. Keep your ego in check is also kind of what we're saying, because we all have an ego, whether we want to admit it or not, but we need to keep it in check, especially if you're a lead, especially in charge of someone. You definitely want to keep that in check, I'm guessing, and you want to build the other team members. So I think, am I correct to assume that if you're in a position of lead, you need to be comfortable making other people shine and taking, getting a lot of the cool credits, to the cool, this is great work, great lighting. You have to be able to take a step back and understand it's not really about you anymore, because you're supposed to be helping your teammates, do their work properly. Does that resonate with you and the way you lead and your experience, or do you have a different thought about that?
No, absolutely. Like that's kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit before, where it's it becomes less about your own personal work and more about helping other people get their stuff to shine. And that kind of goes as well with that sort of the credits, accolades, and things like that. It's because the thing is, at the end of the day, one way to kind of look at it, if you're kind of struggling with that, one way to look at it is if you're kind of leading these people and they're doing kick-ass stuff and everything like that, then that means you're doing your job. If they're happy and they're kicking ass, that means you're doing your job. And so that reflects well back on you. And so, when you see them doing awesome stuff and you're celebrating that and, holding them above and kind of just stepping back, that it sort of helps build confidence there and helps kind of people, get some of that glow. And, especially sometimes, there's certain people who are, suffering from that imposter syndrome or kind of, down on themselves or other ways. And
that was my next question.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that part?
Oh, that's a whole like, conversation in itself, right? Is there
let's first ask, do you feel that you have imposter syndrome, or have you managed to conquer it and go, okay, you're comfortable with your ability and skill set, which is obviously what most people are aiming to it? Or do you have a certain level of imposter syndrome, which is odd to ask if you've already been a lead and you're a principal lighting artist? That is I mean, maybe you have it more, for all I know. I don't know. Maybe you got rid of it.
It never goes away, and I absolutely struggle with it. At least if it doesn't hit me once or twice a month, something's wrong.
Okay, that's interesting that you said that, because I want to connect it to what we just spoke about. To make, again, Kevin has not rehearsed any of these questions. He doesn't even know all these questions ahead of time. I'm really just thinking about them on the spot. So really kudos to Kevin for being able to answer these custom-made questions on the spot. So because you said you have imposter syndrome, but how do you deal with it, right? Because if you're the lead and you have really talented lighting artists, and maybe you're indirectly sometimes feeling, right? Because you see it on our station, you see other people who are younger, they're faster, they're better. What happens? How are you supposed to deal with that? Because you're in charge of them, and you're like, dude, this one is like 10 years younger. He does 10 times faster. His suggestions, I can't keep up with him or her. It's just too much. Should I even be the lead? Have you ever experienced that kind of like challenge ever, or is that you haven't done that yet?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. There's and sometimes it's really easy to kind of wallow in it. And I guess the way I've kind of started to deal with it is almost kind of like accept it as like almost like a punishment, like, oh, of course it's going to, like, the wave is going to wash over me. And
bro, it's okay. You can admit, if you go home and cry, man, we're here for you. It's okay.
I generally don't cry over that, at least. but it's something where, like, I think, if you accept it, it's just like, for me, I've just accepted it's an inevitability. Like, it's always
like a life cycle.
It is a life cycle. It is part of the artistic growth, birth, growth, death, kind of thing, where it always kind of comes back around, and you'll see something where you're like, fuck, man, I should be, what am I doing? And or a lot of times, so what'll happen is if you're working on something personally and you're like, oh, I have this great idea for it, and it just kind of just bounces right off, and it just doesn't work the way you expect it to, and you're like, oh man, do I just suck? And so the way that, so I guess
no, yes,
yeah,
yeah.
It's always just no. I just look at it as an inevitability, and I think sort of just accepting that and really opening myself up to that has really helped me internalize it a little bit less, and just always know there's always going to be people who are better than me. I've always kind of felt like that. Like I'm I know I'm a good lighter, but I know that.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Right. But it's like, I know I'm a good lighter, but I don't think I'm like the best ever, and there's always more to learn. So if I just sort of just be like, yeah, you know what? I don't know everything. I don't need to know everything. And that's okay. And then so that kind of helps me just sort of like, don't freak out about it and don't let it like really get you down. There's always things you can do. And then, the nice thing for at least myself is I have, kind of a pretty big body of work now where I can look back on and just be like, that was good. I can objectively just like look back. It's been a couple years. I can look back and be like, that was really good. You don't suck. You're just psyching yourself out. And then on top of that, this is something I think all of you watching, you should know this, right? So I don't know if you know who Tor Frick is, the guy who he's an amazing like 3D modeler guy. He started Neon Giant Studios. He's one of the co-founders there, and they did that game, The Ascent. It's like this indie darling. It came out and just knocked everybody's doors off. It was awesome. It was sometime like I don't know, about 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was just looking at like, his Twitter or something like that. And he said something about like, heavy imposter syndrome when he was like trying to do something or other. And it's like, I'm looking at this guy who I feel like is just like, this dude's got it all. He's amazing and just kicks ass. And he's got his own studio now and all this other stuff. And like, he's suffering from imposter syndrome. So it's like, you're just like, well, everybody gets it, I guess. So what makes me special for getting that? So if he's suffering from it and I know how rad he is, then I should just like not let it, bug me. If I'm here, I'm just going to try and, assume that like I'm here for, or not assume, but no, I'm here for a reason, that, this studio hired me here to do this. And I'm valid for doing that, and not let that really try and, so it's a really a mental war thing. And on top of that, like there's another like a Formula One team boss for Mercedes, who like the team that has crushed the Constructors Championship for 8 years. I don't know if anybody here is following Formula One. Anyways, he's like this like crazy entrepreneurial like guy, like one of those people where you're just like, there's like very a small percentage of people that are just like that, like crazy, that accomplish that much or whatever. And he's like, there's an interview recently published where he was talking about how he was in therapy for and trying to kind of like normalize that a little bit. Like it's okay to go to need therapy and to like and trust that process if you feel like you need it. And he was saying that a large part of it was that he was like having all these self-doubts and all these other things, and I'm just like, really, this guy? So it's
impossible.
Kind of it's just like, really, this guy of all people is having self-doubts? Like like look at what you've achieved, right? So it's just like with those kind of things in mind, that's sort of how I really cope with the idea of imposter syndrome, and just sort of look at it as it's almost like a familiar friend that pops up every now and then to like just kind of kick you where it hurts, and
it makes sense.
It, and just it always helps if you're able to like I'll always find like if I can just do something, some kind of artistic thing, and do like a nice job at it, it sort of helps like lift me back out of it. Like I can kind of feel like I beat it, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Just it is a lot of it, just that mental war, and just know that you are where you are, whoever you are. If you're suffering from imposter syndrome, you're there for a reason, and you are awesome. So Don't
And then look back into the camera, and then now you say like and subscribe.
like and subscribe. Lighting bot.
There you go. So before I forget, did you want to share something on your screen or something? Or
Oh yeah. I saw some of this stuff. I had some slides prepared, and all that stuff. So let me do that real quick here. And so some of this is going to be a bit redundant. So I apologize if that is the case for any of you.
no, it's not redundant. It just means I can sit still for a bit.
yeah, take a break. Okay, so working as a team for lighting, this is kind of just some of my overall thoughts and how I've kind of separated some of these things down. And a lot of this stuff is not just for lighting. A lot of this is like, kind of any creative endeavor. My father was a contractor who remodeled and built houses, and so there's a lot of analogies that I sort of take from these things as like my childhood. I don't know if any of you are fans of the show Letterkenny, but they've got some good advice there. More hands make less work. It's true. So yeah, things we're going to go through. We've already talked a little bit about me, so I'll kind of skim through most of that. Why teamwork matters. It's, well, duh, because you have to have, teamwork, right, in order to make a team thing happen. But we'll get a little bit more kind of granular about what makes that really happen, right? Kind of working with the exterior teams. We've already touched a little bit on that, like working with environment and design. Being a good teammate within your own lighting team. Like the lighting team itself, in a lot of cases, you're not always working with them. They're kind of the backbone, the nuclear family of the overall family of the studio you happen to be in a lot of cases, right? How to be a leader and a mentor. So that's kind of like when you find yourself, in my position where you've been around for a while, and then you have people who are joining up, who are, finding their own way, how you can help them do that. And then a little bit about personal development. I actually was going to touch on some of these imposter syndrome things here. So so some of this stuff, again, might be a little bit redundant, and then we can have any extra Q&A.
It's nothing redundant. The people are still joining and coming and going, so they would have missed the beginning anyway. So
okay, well, if you join, stay. All right. So about me, really quick. Like I grew up. I'm in Kirkland, Washington now. I grew up in Redmond, Washington. I am the Pacific Northwest townie. Like I grew up in the shadow of Microsoft. Here's me with hair before I joined the game industry, all fresh faced with a puka shell necklace. So late 90s. It was super awesome. So I grew up, and I remember my mom driving, like we were driving somewhere on the freeway, and you could literally see from this local freeway 520, like as you're kind of going towards Bellevue, over to the side, you could actually see the Nintendo of America headquarters that's still there. And like you could see this building with a big Nintendo logo on the side of it. And I just remember just flipping out and be like, what is that? Is that Nintendo? Is that where Nintendo comes from? And my mom was like, no, I think it's from Japan, or whatever. And but that sort of planted that first seed of that video games don't just come out of the magical ether, that they are made by people, and maybe I could be one of those people someday. I spent a lot of my time. I was an awkward nerd through most of my childhood, and spent a lot of time sketching out video game ideas on paper and doing like hypercard animations and things like that. And then I eventually found out that I could mod Quake 3 models, and that's kind of how I got my start doing some like really, really, really bad characters for Quake 3. I'm married to a really nice lady. We met dirt biking, which is pretty cool. It was kind of a once in a million happenstance that we actually ended up talking to each other, but she's super awesome. It's been one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. We got some fur kids. This is Fiona, and I'm a big Mass Effect fan, as you can see. And this is Eska, short for Escarina. So they're both little fluffy, pointy-eared, cute little rascals.
I call the dogs baby training.
Yeah, some people get upset when you say that.
Well, they might.
I agree, man. I agree. Like it's funny. We have some other friends who are like, yeah, it's pretty. A lot of things are pretty similar, right? And so we already kind of went through like a lot of my ship games. Like my first one was a original Xbox classic. The Threat is Real. Shadow Ops Red Mercury. I did the first person hands and weapon animations for this. So that's kind of how I got my start. I had a friend that was working there, and I gave him a 3.5-inch floppy disk with some JPEGs on it, and he took it down there. And the next day I had an interview. And that was like basically when I was like, modding and delivering pizzas at the same time. And then from there, I moved over to Gas Powered Games and worked on Dungeon Siege. I didn't put it in here, but I also worked on Supreme Commander as well, doing some like little robots and animations there. So I was still kind of doing like character type things and animation type things at that time, kind of a jack of all trades, which, sort of what I really am. From there, I moved over to ArenaNet and worked on Guild Wars, several of their expansions as a character artist, doing armor sets. That was a lot of fun. It was literally kind of like you're dressing, like we had these mannequins and you're putting armor on them, and it's kind of like you're playing like medieval dress up in a video game world. So that was really fun to work on. Really good group of people. And then I was able to go and join Bungie and work on Halo 3 ODST. This was kind of right after Halo 3 came out. The world was just like on fire for Halo. It was really, really cool times to be, especially to be working at the studio. And ODST still kind of stands out as a very cool project. So when I got there, they were like, "Hey, we want you to do environment art." And I was like, "Okay, but that's not really the things I've done before." And they're like, "Yeah, but that's what we want you to do." So
you don't get your shoes doing.
Yeah, and I was like, "Hey, well, I'm working on Halo, so okay, cool." So I ended up doing some environment art, and I ended up at the time I was playing Dead Space. The kind of original that EA horror game. I'm a big horror fan. I feel like a lot of lighting artists are kind of horror fans in ways because of the moodiness and how much it's really like people are kind of surprised, but lighting artists a lot of times like the absence of light. That's so true. At the time I was working on this like sewer underground level, and I was doing some lighting that was coming from these glowing gratings that you're going past down there. And like, some of the people were like, "Oh, that's really cool. Do you want to like do some actual lighting on this other stuff?" And so I started doing that. And then I was contracting at the time, and then they had me come back to work on Reach as the only dedicated lighting artist on the game for a large portion. We did have somebody come and help out towards the end, but for better or worse, I got to light most of Reach. So that was my first like I had no idea what a lighting artist was. I just kind of knew the basics of this is, how you light. So I really kind of like learned on the job and sort of picked up a lot of things as I went and started studying it more and more. And then
you ruined your rating pattern. I was expecting TM, but you went TM, RP, RP.
Yeah, I think they're all M, honestly, or most of the Halo, which is really weird. It was really funny, like where, like the Halo games are like rated M, and they're like right next to Gears of War, which is also rated M. And it's like the actual mature content between these two games, where it's like this guy's getting sawed in half by a chainsaw with blood flying everywhere versus like getting shot. I also thought it was kind of funny that they had the same rating. But yeah, then moved over and worked on Halo 4, and there I was a dedicated lighter. Worked on a few of the missions there and a few of the cutscenes. A lot of the cutscenes were things were like flying through space, and it was a lot of fun with proprietary tools. And then again, over.
But what do you think Nintendo feels about it? I mean, you grew up not too far from the Nintendo building, and here you are making Xbox games all the time.
Well, I grew up not too far from the Microsoft building too. So.
So they won the influence.
Yeah. It's they're like, it was kind of it, like, that's the thing. I feel really, really lucky that I've never had to ever like move for a job. I've had opportunities to, and I've been able to go do some really cool traveling, but I've always been able to stay close to home and close to family because of just the luck of growing up in this area. So
I moved twice already.
Yeah, right. Like, and most people have, right? Like most people you talk to, they're like, it's very rare that I run into another person kind of from the same area. But luckily, the nice thing with a lot of the remote stuff is people can kind of stay where they want to be and work from there. Although recently talked to a few people where they're excited to move, over to the US, or, one guy was like, I can't wait. I really want to move back to LA. And I was like, really? Okay. So anyway, nothing against LA. Anyway, so yeah, I worked on Halo 5, doing lighting there. And then I moved up into the senior role when I was working on Halo Infinite. And that's where I started kind of doing a little bit more of this management. And I feel like I really need to shout out like the lighting lead at 343, Lee Urin, who's like honestly like a huge inspiration for all of my attitude about how leadership should work. He is just one of the sweetest people with this infinite patience and a big heart, and always does like he's like as far as how you're talking about earlier about how you step back and let other people have kind of the spotlight and you're just sort of there to support. Like he kind of exemplifies that. So I really saw how he treated some of these things, and really wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps and follow his cue to be that way myself, because he was such a great lead for me and he did so much for me. So yeah, and then I moved from there to go work on Dungeons and Dragons for a little bit at Hidden Path, and then working on some cool stylized stuff that I can't really talk about. And that's been my career trajectory up until now.
We're also now working on 4 or 5 Halo titles in a row.
Yeah. It was like, yeah, I remember it was really hard to go to, honestly. Like the people at that studio are just so great. And I remember like my goodbye email, I actually went back and looked at the first day I started on ODST and kind of looked at the span of time that I've been working on Halo, and it'd been over 10 years and like almost 11 years. So it's pretty crazy. Anyway, so kind of getting into some of these things, why teamwork matters. Well, it's kind of a obvious sort of thing. More hands make less work, and yeah, it's a cute little phrase, but it really is true. Like when you have people that are dedicated to things, and then if you are kind of leading that sort of thing up, then you are allowing these people to really just get in and get the job done, and you'll kind of be shocked by the speed at which things get done when you're just like, oh, like it there is kind of this multiplicative sense of it. Although there can be churn as things grow, and communication can like break down, so you don't want to do that too fast, but it is very important. Yeah, you allow the specialists to do their special things, right? So allow the lighting artists to get on with what they're doing, and kind of keep information poignant where it's needed, and support them as much as possible. And again, this kind of goes across to any other kind of creative endeavor, is just allowing people who know what they're doing to get on with what they're doing, and listen to them if they have concerns, because they probably know better than you, because they're a lot closer to it. So
does that include giving them the expensive screens and equipment that they need to do the work, or is that not included?
Of course, only the 4K HDR, man. Color calibrated. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, that's all the that's certainly one thing is, generally I haven't really encountered anything where people aren't like, oh yeah, here, like if you need something, or even like, oh, I need to like a better chair or a standing desk or other things like that. Generally people will do as much as they can to kind of make things comfortable, particularly since in a lot of cases, people aren't really paying for buildings anymore. And people are working from their homes, so as much as they can do to kind of make that a good work environment, that's very helpful, and it does allow the specialists to do their special things. It allows everybody to work better. Unless you're a solo indie dev, teamwork does indeed make the dream work. I hate these phrases, but it's true, right? It's a necessity to make any of these, something as big as like a Halo or just about any other game you can think of. There's very few where you can honestly say that is one person and one person alone, where they didn't need some help, some guidance, or assistance from anything else. So it's part of being a human being is we need to communicate and help each other out, right? Communication is super key. I don't know how many times I've seen people kind of go into their rabbit holes where they're working on their things in kind of isolation, and then boom, all of a sudden all of your light fixtures are behind a wall, things like that, right? So and I've seen things like this happen too, where it's literally where you have like things that aren't fitting together because people didn't talk to each other. And in the lighting sense, a lot of like the communication can be helpful by just sort of telling people like what you're doing, what your intent is, and like allowing people to sort of like, oh, well, if you're going to be doing that, like keep in mind that this is going to be happening. You're like, oh, okay, cool, good to know. I was not aware of that before, and now I can kind of move forward with that. So talk to the people you're working with frequently. I mean, a lot of places will have like stand-ups and other things where there's organized, structured ways for people to talk to each other. But if you have any questions or anything like that, make sure to ask. Don't assume anything. That's another kind of point I would like to make. But another thing to kind of keep in mind is when you're working across a broad team is everyone is trying. Everyone is doing what they think is best. An example,
blame everyone, basically, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's everybody else's. We're all at fault, right? Everybody's trying and everybody's doing what they think is best. Everybody is, it's kind of like to make it like a funny analogy, right? Is like, think of like Game of Thrones, right? Where there's, this complex characters and there's certain people who you're like, that's the bad guy from the very beginning, but then after a certain point you end up where you're actually in their shoes and you're kind of viewing the world from their lens, and they don't.
You might die. Let's not forget that.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's very likely. So yeah, don't actually go be in Game of Thrones. Just imagine being in Game of Thrones. But yeah, that's that sort of thing where everybody is kind of the good guy in their own head. And that's true, even in mundane things like game development. Is everybody is trying to do what they think is best, and you're trying to all accomplish the same goal. So if you find yourself like having these like things where you're like butting heads about things, just remember, don't take it personally, and remember that everybody is they're trying to accomplish the same thing. So if you feel like people are getting kind of emotionally involved in things like that, just be like, remind them helpfully, like, hey, I'm just trying to do the best thing I can to, from my side. And this is sort of what I've been told is most important. So, and that's kind of at odds with what you're saying. So like, let's talk about that. I'm not, and keep things professional and keep it, try and keep it from being too personal, because again, everyone's trying. Like even that person that you're like, God, why are they such a dick? They're trying to, and it's just the way that they're doing it just doesn't gel with you just yet. So always keep that in mind. Don't always assume that your way is the only way. Don't get kind of rabbit holed into like thinking that one thing is the only way to do it. Try and turn that part off and listen to what other people have to say, and really take a look at it from an objective side. Saying that like, oh, actually I was wrong and this is the other way to do it is not a bad thing at all. It's a very mature thing to do, and it doesn't mean that you're not good.
Never, Kevin, never. Yeah. I would never do such a thing.
Right. So yeah, exactly. I like how you're like playing the devil's advocate over here.
This is a different way of doing presentation. This is a two-way presentation with some pressure.
I love it. This is like the weirdest GDC talk, right?
Yeah, this is the best type of GDC talk.
The best GDC talk, yeah. It's like that Mick Gordon one where he's talking about like pictograms into the waveform.
Exactly.
So working with exterior teams, that's, where we're talking about working with environment and design and things like that. Communicate, never assume. You're going to see a lot of common things through all this stuff. So yeah, always, if there's anything where you're like, I hope that's what they meant by this. I think that's what they meant by this. If that's kind of your mindset, you should probably just ask just to make sure. And they might be like, yeah, it's supposed to be like that, like all annoyed or something like that. But like, guess what? It's better for you to know for sure than for them to have to type a quick message to you or whatever that happens to be.
So is it like me asking you, what do you mean with working with exterior teams? So is that a team outside of the company, or are you talking about the other departments in the company?
The other departments. I guess I should. I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I should have said other departments.
I'm just following your advice. It says communicate, never assume. So
no, that's good. If somebody just jumped in right now, they'd be like, "Oh, are they talking about outsourcing?" So that's a good point. So you can see it right here in action. I mean, you're the best, man.
Putting people on the spot.
So also when you're working with like design and everything like that, lighting is, and I mean, I'm sure most people who have been lighting for a while have realized this pretty quickly. If their stuff breaks, the team can't play test. If the map is dark, if stuff is really broken, you're getting a really, really bad, like it's going to tarnish everything that you are going to be playing. So your support, you need to kind of be there at available. If the environment team says, hey, like it looks like it looks like the values are all off, or something didn't get baked, or something's wrong, you kind of have to, like, to a certain extent, kind of drop what you're doing and at least kind of look into what is happening. Like, hey, can you send me a screenshot of what it looks like? And then you can have that, like, oh shit, moment.
Yep.
And prioritize that, because if lighting is broken or other things like that, and these are things that are out of your control. This stuff happens all the time. It's not like a personal thing. It happens all the time. Like light mappers break and other things like that. But if there is something that's stopping people from being able to work, or especially being able to play test, then that's a big problem, because those are really important facets of the development process. So as much as you can to try and support those things and get that fix in quick if there's something wrong. So yeah, just keep
sometimes
that.
It's not even your fault, right? Sometimes it looks like it's lighting, but you have to join the troubleshooting and kind of figure out, is it really lighting or is it something else? That happens a lot, at least in my case, happens a lot.
Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of times you're totally right. A lot of times it's something where you'll like look at something and be like, oh, the lighting's actually fine. There's like a screen effect or some kind of other thing that's causing everything to be like really, really dark. There's, depending on how proprietary the engine is you're working on, there's a litany of different things that can happen there. Or even Unreal has had some stuff like that happen where, if different, like I've had some things where like a post-process volume gets loaded in from another level that wasn't supposed to be there, and all of a sudden your exposure is super whack. So kind of
troubleshooting skills is very important here to be able to kind of support them, basically.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, like that kind of having attitude.
So do you do that though as a lead lighting artist, or would you let the lighting artist who is responsible for the level do that? How does that actually work?
I mean, it kind of depends. If honestly, I would encourage the environment team or whoever's working, like, if you know who the lighting artist is who's responsible for this, just contact them directly. And if they have a question as to what it might be, they can contact me. Or if they don't know who the lighting artist is, and I've had people do that too, where they're like, hey, the lighting in like X map is busted, and like send me a screenshot or whatever. Then it's like, oh, okay. And then half the time, because you kind of been through it so many times, you're like, oh, I know exactly what's going on here. And I know who's working on the map, and just be like, hey, so-and-so, like, it looks like one of these volumes got messed up or whatever. Here's the screenshot. And I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. And then like 5 minutes later, like fix is checked in, and be like, nice, and, kind of communicate that up and say like, yeah, so-and-so is rad, and they just fixed it like that.
I think if you don't know who the lighting artist is for a level, then that means your team is already quite big. That's like if you don't know who's doing the part of the work, then you have a big team already.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the thing on like, some of the stuff where, in cinematics where we had like kind of the campaign lighting team. So knowing who was working in each kind of area was not always clear, right? So have to figure out like, oh, who's responsible for like this area of like the open world, because I was more focused on multiplayer and the cinematic side. And yeah, it was a big team. So actually there was certain points where like I don't actually know who's responsible for this part of the campaign stuff or whatever. But it's it's all easy to figure it out, right? We did end up with a pretty big lighting team on Infinite. So that was a really cool experience. Lots of really good people. So to let the creative instincts of everyone be heard, we're all here because we have good eyeballs. So what that means is that so I've had lots of instances where I've been talking with environment art, and we're looking at stuff and having a review, and they have we're all here because we're artists and looking at big picture and stuff like that. And I guess the main point of this is to be receptive. Sometimes you'll get comments from either environment or even design where they're like, oh, it'd be really cool if maybe this was highlighted because this is, important for X reason. And they, you might not have like envisioned the original scene that way, but if you kind of just stop and like listen and just sort of let that soak in, and again, don't be like, oh, they don't like it the way I have it set up. Don't take those things personally. And they might have a good point. And so, and again, it kind of comes down to if you change, how you're doing things, or you say, oh, you know what, actually, I agree with that. I'm going to change it to that. That doesn't mean that your original idea was wrong. It just means that you're acting on new information. And that's a good and mature thing to be doing. And people will recognize that, you're already there because you're good. You don't need to prove that. So
I will remind people about something while you read the private message I just sent you. A reminder for everyone else while you read it. There are quite a few of you watching, so please do leave a positive comment, share the video, support us. That doesn't cost you anything, so take the time to do that. And yeah, I sent you a private message while I said that, so you can read that as well. So yeah, please do that, and I'll let you continue after you read that.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. We're good timelines. Yeah. So and then again, I'm just going to kind of keep banging on this. Never take things personally. And I'll kind of go into a little bit more detail, but really, it's whenever you're having a conversation with someone, and I feel like a lot of us probably have, where you're talking about something creative, and you kind of they're saying something, and you're feeling like you're feeling that little bit of like, I'm being attacked, or my ego is being attacked a little bit, and you feel your ears getting hot a little bit, or that kind of those sort of some of those key tells are happening where you can tell that you're like, I'm actually kind of starting to take this personally, and you can kind of recognize when you're doing this. It's hard because you're sort of caught in that moment, but when you start feeling like that, just know like these are the key signs that I am starting to get a bit like emotionally involved with this, and that generally means like, try and like kind of talk yourself down from that kind of response, and just try and open yourself up to just sort of listen, go into listening mode, I guess, at that point. Like, don't hear out what they have to say, and stop and think, and just be like, okay, like give me a second to kind of, think about this, and just, kind of formulate your things. And if there's things where you're like, I really disagree with that, try and figure out like why, and make a good statement as to like why you disagree, and don't just be, don't fire back. Don't be like, I don't think that's right. Or, or you can say, I don't think that's right. Here's why. But, try and keep things very professional, and just
think about the big picture and the project. Like, remind yourself basically that, does this benefit the project and the level or not to take it personally, basically. Or as we said earlier, don't let your ego interfere with your decision-making skills, I guess, is part of the thing here.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And another thing to kind of keep in mind on top of that, when you are, when sometimes you find these decisions being made, and like sometimes you're just not going to be happy with them. Like it's sort of an inevitability. And just remember that like at the end of the day, you are here to, if you have to like this kind of takes a lot of the dreams out of it, and a lot of like the fluffy things. But at the end of the day, you are making a product. You're making a product for somebody, and you're being paid to do so. So at the end result of it, if the kind of chips are down, and like this is the way that it's heading, and even if you're kind of not liking it, just be like, okay, that's fine. I have, you have absolute control over all the personal projects you do and other things like that. And sometimes on these bigger projects with these bigger teams where there's a lot of different cooks in the kitchen and things like that, you just don't have the ability to always kind of, get what you want there. I feel like a lot of things I lit would be a lot more like horror things if I didn't have like some of that pushback and stuff like that. So sometimes it's kind of a good thing too. Like there's a balance that can kind of go on between your own personal styles and what might be the best benefit for the game. So it's important to kind of just keep that in mind. So working within your own lighting team, this is your home. Here, this is the backbone of the group that you're going to be working with. I don't know how big your teams might be at the at Halo, we were over double digits, at a point. So it was actually a pretty big crew. It was a really great crew. We actually spent a lot of time hanging
They
out.
were over double digits on Halo? The lighting team itself?
Yeah, like over 10 people. Yeah.
Wow.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
People must have learned a lot in such a big team.
Yeah, it was a really, really interesting experience. It wasn't always smooth. But the core team was always kind of like together on these things, and that's sort of that's almost like where you're all kind of surviving together when you have some trials and tribulations and things. But don't be afraid to ask for help. One of my favorite things that I would see is some people who there's I don't know. I feel like when I was a junior, like when I first started, I had such like an ego, or like I need to do it myself, and like I had all these different things. But some of these other people that joined, they would just hit me up and be like, "Hey man, I've been like trying to get this thing to look cool, but I'm just not really happy with it. Can you take a look at it with me?" And it was just like, "Oh wow, that's just cool to that you're just kind of asking outright." And like absolutely, and we would look at it and talk about it, and generally find some suggestions and some other things. And you kind of hear like towards after, as we get out of the meeting, they'd be like, all right, super jazzed, and kind of have a better direction for how to go and feel really good about the direction that they're going. So, you've kind of just helped them out. And like, now their things are going to be better. So again, it's not about you. It's about them. And so, asking for help asking for help if you are kind of in a rut and things like that. You have this whole entire support network for you, and some of the opinions and directions you'll get out of that are super valuable, and you should definitely embrace that. It's they will only make you better.
You have a few comments, but I'm going to put this one up. Very interesting how you're talking about not taking things personally. It took me a long time to be able to do this. As someone who's recently a lighting lead, I am loving this so far.
Oh, great, man. That's really great to hear. I love that that you kind of arrived at sort of a similar spot. It's, because we're all kind of like, we're all in our own experiences where we are, where we've gotten. So it's kind of like, this is sort of how I feel like it's been. And it's sort of nice to know that it's, you're not alone, and that it's, this is other people have kind of arrived at that same kind of way of doing things.
Yeah, and other people have been watching since the beginning, and they have concluded that dogs are mandatory.
They're pretty great. They're, especially working from home, man. They just love it. It's pretty awesome having them just hanging out with you all day, and just being able to like go for walks or whatever, just pick up and go. It really makes it kind of, man, it was so sad when you had to just be gone for like 9 or 10 hours a day, and depending on your commute, and they would just be like, where are they?
This must be a very hard presentation. I mean, you keep getting interrupted by me. It's not the easiest one, is it? It's just so interactive, isn't it?
And,
too much.
I like deal with like between like the dogs you were just talking about, or like my wife like loves. She just know, like it's like she has like a sixth sense. Like she knows when I'm like in the middle of like an important meeting or whatever, and we'll just like pop her head and be like, hey, I'm gonna go. She'll like she loves kind of just dive bombing me and things. So I'm like pretty used to just having like random distractions like popping up all the time. So not saying you're a random distraction on me, but it's welcome interjections, I guess, right?
It's all about entertainment as well as education.
That's what we're here for, man. Yeah, that's what we're here for. Hearts and minds. So yeah, working through things together allows everybody to grow, build trust. That's kind of like the give and take, right? When that example where where I'd work with somebody on something, they would leave and have kind of a better direction, things like that, and then I would sort of know them better and have a better idea of like where they are with everything, and sort of understand them better. And generally, like I think each one of those interactions, you really kind of get a closer bond, and you kind of trust each other more. And then hopefully likewise from their perspective, now they know that if I ask them for help, they're going to be super cool and helpful, and like it'll be a really good experience, and I will definitely do that again in the future if I need to. So it's a really good kind of positive like feedback kind of loop, right? And then the end result will be better by leveraging everybody's skill. We're all here because we got good eyeballs, and so it's kind of a similar thing. Disagreements, we kind of
I know about this question. You punch them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just punch them. You just do this. So you don't like? Do you agree with me or disagree with me? You're like, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just resort to physical violence. Lighting bot, like and subscribe.
You have a question actually. It might be related to your answer now. Any advice on managing a team remotely? I have found gaining trust and dealing with different time zones challenging or changing.
I assume you meant challenging, which is it's true. You don't have, a lot of times you're able to. There's just nothing that really quite compares to that in-person thing where you could like kind of talk to people and be in the presence, or you could go have lunches together, or on Fridays everybody goes and gets some beers and things like that, and you kind of are you can really kind of welcome people in and make them feel part of everything. And that honestly, it's a really tricky thing with the remote work. That's probably one of the biggest downsides, I would say. But I would say like one thing that you can do is kind of try and frequently touch base with them via via video chats and things like that, and like have a really scheduled regular point where you guys can like just talk and have a one-on-one, and make it a very kind of friendly, safe place to just sort of like just check in. And this kind of goes back to we were talking earlier about how there's kind of the psychological side of it, and the mental health side of it, and having these kind of check-ins to just see how people are doing, see how they feel about everything, how their onboarding has gone, and just how they're feeling with the team, and trying to kind of coax some of those things out of them, and kind of understand better where they may or may not be feeling like really good about things. But I would say if possible, it's kind of hard. Not everybody's a gamer, but doing some setting aside some time for like the team to like play games together, or doing anything like kind of fun like that. That's something that you can do remotely is really helpful. If you got people who are into D&D, having a D&D session or two, like doing some one shots or something like that. Even if they're not like really into it, you'd be like, hey, let's try a D&D one shot, and it'll count as work time, but let's just spend that time to kind of like help everybody get to know each other, and kind of start building that camaraderie, because it's really hard when you're remote.
I'm surprised though he's allowed to be remotely, because all the conversation I've had, the requirement was to be in the studio as a lead. So that's interesting that he's allowed to do it remotely, because normally they want you to be in the studio, and they want you to, if you lead a junior, the recent conversations has been that you have to be in the studio junior, because you need to be mentored and trained often, so you want the lead to be there for that same reason. But I don't know if he meant like 2 times a week or something, but that's an interesting that I think that's interesting for me that he's allowed to be remotely, because I haven't met anyone who's actually allowed to be lead remotely. But you lead remotely as well, or did you have to go into the studio?
Yeah, I've been remote since March of 2020, and I have gone into studios on occasion, but generally, cool. Yeah, everything's happening remote. So I think it probably just really depends on your studio and how they want to handle those kinds of things. I know some places they want people to relocate and to be there and to start going into the studio, and other places, like one of the attractive features of the studio is like, hey, you can be remote 100% of the time. You can live wherever you want, as long as you are here for our core hours, and able to kind of as long as you got a good enough internet connection, right?
I would want to be in the studio. If I were a lead, I would prefer at least the juniors and me, the lead, to be in the studio. Actually, I wouldn't want to be remote if I was the lead, because I mean, part of the lead is the human aspect of it. So if it's just online, if it's video, for me, I would probably lose part of the charm if I was the lead.
You got all the charm to the camera, man. Right. But in that case, I mean, if you are close enough to actually be able to go into the studio together, I would kind of alternatively say, like, if you are sticking with a remote kind of way of doing things, if you are close enough together, I would recommend doing things like, having like team lunches, or like little events, or like, let's go get drinks and play putt golf, or any of the other things, as long as people are comfortable with, as kind of COVID's gone up and down. That's been a really tricky thing to do, but yeah, that does, if you are local but you're still working remote, then there's some other kind of like offsite team building, as we always like to call it, which in a lot of cases was us drinking. But
it's good conversation. That's actually a topic we probably should cover that another time, because it's a very interesting topic to talk about, the whole remote factor and the consequences of having remote teams, and the human aspect that I think is being lost with the whole focus of just being remotely. So that's definitely an interesting conversation. We should do that, like its own talk. Actually, that's a very deep topic.
It is. There's a lot of nuance there, but yeah, it definitely, suffice to say, it's really good in a lot of ways, but that is one of the things that's lost. And like, I don't have a really, really good answer for how to really get that pre-remote like level of like familiarity and like kind of like intimacy between like the team, where you're all like in the same space talking to each other. But it's it can kind of help, like, as if there's already people who know each other in the team and you're bringing in new people, that sort of camaraderie can like help sort of ease them in. If you're just slamming a whole bunch of people who've never worked together at one time, I think that would be really hard to get good cohesion from remote. But again, personality and just sticking with it, and just talking to people, and taking the time, as always. I think a lot of leads do one-on-one time and everything like that, but that's extra important with remote, to make sure that they are not just kind of doing their thing and just kind of sadly off to the wayside, and not and potentially like struggling with things, and you just don't know because they're kind of out of sight in that sense. So yeah, definitely spend the time to talk to people. Never take things personally. Again. How to be a leader and mentor. So yeah, you have kind of craft versus heart. And we just sort of touched on that psychological side of it. There's definitely been times where there's people who they are trying to work, they're feeling like they've gotten some like bad feedback or other things like that, where they're really kind of self-doubting. You can see kind of some of that imposter syndrome symptoms setting in a little bit. And a lot of times just talking to them, and kind of like just going over things, reassuring, and it's really kind of like a conversation. It's a conversation where it's really more about listening, and in like kind of hearing what they have to say, and kind of addressing what those concerns are. So part of being a leader is not just like, hey, do this, but a lot of it is also trying to make sure that people are feeling like mentally fit and happy about the direction that they're going. So there's definitely and that's another thing, when you're kind of talking about like, some people, should they step up to being a lead or not? I think that's another question to ask yourself, is do you want to open yourself up to having to, like, that's something that you need to be able to do, and something that you need to at least kind of like, I personally really enjoy being able to help somebody out if they're struggling or having a bad time. If I can do anything to make their life better, it's great, and I feel like I can do that pretty well. I think sometimes better than lighting. So I think that's a very important part of the leadership that doesn't always get talked about, is kind of being that listener person and helping them out,
acknowledging someone.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay to really kind of like talk and cross those lines a little bit, and like allow there's to be there for people, because the work can sometimes be rough, and like with COVID and everything, like there's a lot going on in the world. It's scary times, and it's still kind of, there's a lot going on in the world, and we've all got each other, so let's all be there as much as we can, right? So yeah, it's not about you, it's about them, and that's, we've already kind of beat that into the ground, but it's really it's not about your own personal gains or your own artistic gains in that sense. It's about getting everybody else to the point where you're like, look at this awesome stuff they did, look at them, everybody look at them, and really celebrating those people, because their success is your success, and as a team going up, and that's your job. It's not your job anymore to make the most amazing lighting. In a lot of cases, you'll still, if you're lucky and it's a smaller team, you'll still be able to do some lighting and hopefully do some really awesome stuff. But the more you go into this and the bigger your team gets, the more you're going to be like, that's my focus, is just helping them achieve the awesomeness, right?
I should become a lead. This sounds like more interesting for me than just doing lighting.
Actually, if you're into that. And again, it's not for everybody. When you are giving direction and things like that, try and keep hands off as much as possible. In a lot of cases, just kind of advising this or that. You're always going to have struggles where you're like, I just want to reach through the monitor, grab the mouse, and just do the thing. But resist that urge. Don't nudge the toilet. I don't know if, hopefully you've all seen the art direction.gif that's been around or GIF, depending on how you pronounce it, that's been around for 15 years. It's been around forever, and we've laughed at it forever, where it's the guy who's at his desk and he's working on, moving this toilet around. There's a guy behind him doing like that, and then that, and he's just moving it back and forth. And so don't be a toilet nudger. Try and just focus on the main points that you want to get across, and keep that clear and concise. Leave room for creativity, kind of get those main points across, but allow them to have ownership, and try and come up with solutions to things, where you're like, all right, well, we want to definitely have this key kind of coming from here, and maybe some, you could do some uplighting, or you could do something like this or that over there. Why don't you try a few things out and see what you think looks really good, and kind of leave that ball to them. And in that case, you're also sort of offering this kind of responsibility in that sense. And so that kind of, get ownership. Step up and do that, right? So that's good. Always listen. When you're talking about these things, when you're kind of done having your spiel, say, how do you feel about that? Let them, talk about everybody's here because they got good eyeballs and they got good creative juices in their veins. So let them kind of say how they feel about it, and they might be like, well, actually, I don't really like it, because I think it kind of, we lose, after doing that, we lose all this and this and this, and then that might, prompt you to go, oh, well, actually, I think you can have that and that, because of if you do these other things. And so that can be part of the creative process.
So you have a question from Pablo. What are the best practices if your goal is to be a lead or supervisor?
Best practices, things to just do.
It's kind of what you're saying here, isn't it? Listen, support, those kind of things, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Listen, support. And the thing is, if you are able to have kind of the confidence to sort of know what, the right solutions for things, some of that kind of comes from experience, where I've done this 10 times. I know what's probably going to work best here. So you can kind of confidently say, I think maybe we should do this, and et cetera. And, kind of say that in a be confident, but don't be bullish, or don't be, don't be too directive or telling them what to do kind of thing, but be confident in what you're saying, but also, continually listen, and, and be that sponge, and bring those ideas in. And just try and I think it's one of those things you'll kind of just naturally find yourself doing if you're kind of following some of these things and working with the right people. But it all kind of, your environment matters, what project you're working on matters, and all those kinds of things. But just try and follow some of this stuff, and just spend time listening, and yeah, I don't know if you can find somebody else who's kind of leading, and if you're like, I would like to be a leader at some point, find somebody who you admire the way they're doing things, and kind of study how they're doing things, because it's kind of a learned skill. It's not something we all are just kind of naturally born with, I guess. I mean, maybe some people are, but yeah, it kind of comes from a lot of just watching and listening and absorbing things, being the sponge. Okay, we already touched on that. Oh yeah, lead by example. I mean, and what I mean by that is just when have integrity. When you tell someone you're going to do something, you make sure you do it. Be reliable. Be there for people. Those are things that I think are really, really important. When hey, when you're like, hey, we'll spend some time going through this later on today. Like right now, I have this. Don't forget about that meeting. Make sure that they know that they're important and that you're there for them. That's, I think that really kind of speaks for itself, and that will make itself known. So, I got there. Okay, sorry. One quick sip of water here.
No, you have to do it without drinking anything.
Okay, so we already kind of touched a whole lot of imposter syndrome stuff. If you want, I can kind of go. Sometimes we isolate ourselves because if you're doing something and you fall short of your own expectations, then your imposter syndrome sense just nosedives, and you're like, oh man, do I actually just suck? Sometimes we isolate ourselves because of that, and want to hide and try and work our way out so nobody knows how qualified and shitty I am, But that's actually kind of the wrong way to do it. This is where if you're feeling that way and you're working on something and you're like, oh, I need to have this done by Friday. It's looking bad right now. I'm not happy. I'm just going to try and bulldog my way through because I don't want anybody to know that I'm actually I shouldn't be here because I'm terrible. Those feelings we've all been in, had and done. Right. So that's a really good time where embrace it. No, I'm just feeling imposter syndrome. I'm hitting a little bit of a roadblock, which happens to everyone. The most amazing artist you've ever seen before totally hit this stuff before too. So at that point, ask for some help. If you're struggling with something, just if there's somebody you trust, just ping them and say, hey, can we do a quick screen share or whatever, and let's take a look at I'm just trying to get this to this, and I just can't find a good way to resolve these things, and accept some help and just listen to what people have to say, and that let them kind of help make your stuff better. And that's all part of the process. And someday you'll be in the exact same opposite seat, helping somebody else out when they're having issues with things. This is all part of us doing it together. Yeah, find someone to talk to. If there's my email address, if anybody wants to talk any further or has any questions or anything like that, I make myself freely available to talk about it.
You definitely did now on the channel and live stream. Now you're gonna get spam now.
Maybe this is a terrible idea. Growth mindset, that's all about kind of opening yourself up, being a sponge, less about trying to be perfect in yourself and do everything alone. You don't need to accept the help and open yourself up for ways that it can make you better. And with that, embrace the smart people around you. Everywhere I go, I feel this is kind of the same part of the imposter thing, right? Where you are I'm just surrounded by these people who are just amazing, and what the hell am I doing here? But yeah, ask advice and embrace ask advice, ask questions. If you're hey, how do you do that with one thing? Talk to them about it, and they'll probably gladly share it with you. And then now that too. So this is how we all get better. So I'm gonna get my email address off of here now.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's only people who watch the stream that's obviously gonna
yeah,
email you.
wait till the bots get a hold of it.
I don't think the bot yet. Maybe I don't think the bot are that intelligent yet that they can check that on the stream. Or they might be. I mean, they can check the facial language and images now. So, but hopefully not. At least we didn't add it on the chat or anything. So
yeah. But I'm also on like the Discord too. So yeah, if anybody wants to talk, hit me up. I'm super happy to talk. I love it. So.
Yeah, so thank you for all of this, and thank you for your time. I think we have reached. Technically, we are quite over time, but Kevin was kind enough to keep going. So let's end this. I'm gonna skip the outro as well because Kevin needs to go as well. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. You can just join the Lightning Bot Discord. He's there. I'm there. If you have any more questions, and what I'll do, we're gonna end the broadcast. I'm gonna talk to him a bit. 2-3 minutes before he runs off, and then he can go on with his day. So yeah, thanks for everyone. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. I was about to say goodbye, but that doesn't mean anything. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.